You can forget every single word someone said to you yesterday, but your brain will remember how they made you feel for 50 years. In 1933, a Swiss psychologist named Edward Claparede walked into a room to meet a woman living with severe amnesia. Her short-term memory was completely broken. Every morning, Claparede had to introduce himself to her as if they were total strangers. She never recognized his face, his voice, or his name. Then, one morning, Claparede decided to conduct a silent and subtle experiment. He hid a sharp little pin between his fingers. When he reached out to shake her hand, the pin pricked her skin. The woman flinched in sudden pain. Claparede apologized, left the room, and returned just 15 minutes later. As expected, she had no idea who he was. She looked at his face with blank, unrecognizing eyes. But when he reached out his hand for a normal greeting, she instantly pulled her hand back in sheer terror. When Claparede asked her why she refused to shake his hand, she looked visibly confused. She said, "Is it possible that you have a pin hidden in your hand?" He asked how she could possibly know that. She hesitated and whispered, "Sometimes people hide pins in their hands." She could not remember his name. She could not remember his face. She could not recall the physical event of being pricked just minutes earlier. But the raw, primitive feeling of danger was permanently locked inside her mind. This single experiment exposed a terrifying split in human consciousness. Your brain uses two entirely separate systems to build your reality. The first system is your hippocampus, located deep within the temporal lobe. Think of it as a conscious librarian. It records specific dates, names, exact sentences, and geographic locations. It is structured, precise, and remarkably fragile. Over time, the librarian gets tired, and the detailed records slowly fade into background noise. The second system is your amygdala, an ancient almond-shaped alarm system. It does not care about grammar, exact names, or logical arguments. It only tracks one thing: emotional impact. When someone insults you, validates you, or threatens your safety, your amygdala releases a sudden surge of stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. These chemicals act like wet concrete poured directly over your neural pathways. They bypass the fragile librarian entirely and stamp the emotional weight straight into your autonomic nervous system. Why did natural selection design us this way? Because remembering hyper-specific details requires massive amounts of neurological processing power. Millions of years ago, if a dangerous predator lunged at your ancestor from a dark cave, your ancestor did not need to remember the exact shade of the beast's fur or the rhythmic sound of the rustling leaves. They only needed to remember the paralyzing surge of fear triggered by the entrance of that dark cave. Fear kept you alive. Specific details were useless overhead. To prove how deep this split goes, modern neuroscientists studied patients with localized brain damage. When researchers destroyed the hippocampus of a patient, the patient could no longer form new factual memories, yet they could still learn to fear a loud noise paired with a blue light. Conversely, when researchers studied patients with a damaged amygdala, subjects could memorize every factual detail of an experiment, but their bodies showed zero physical stress response when danger approached. One group knew the facts but felt nothing. The other group felt the terror but knew no facts. This fundamental biological divide explains the bizarre architecture of your personal memories. Consider your own past. You sit through a 2-hour lecture or a detailed business meeting, and by dinner, 90% of the exact words are gone. But if a classmate made a subtle, mocking joke about your clothes 20 years ago in a crowded hallway, you can still feel the exact thermal flush of shame in your cheeks today. The specific words disappeared into dust decades ago. The emotional scar remained entirely intact. Your mind is constantly editing out the noise of life to save energy. Words require conscious translation, syntactic processing, and mental storage. Feelings, however, are direct chemical reactions. They burn themselves into your muscle memory, your heart rate, and your breath long before your conscious mind even finishes processing the sentence. This is why logical arguments almost never change someone's mind in a heated debate. When you bombard someone with facts, their conscious librarian struggles to file the data. But if your tone makes them feel small, threatened, or foolish, their amygdala triggers an immediate defensive threat response. They will completely forget your brilliant statistics by tomorrow, but they will remember you as an enemy forever. The human mind is not a neutral recording device designed for historical accuracy. It is a biological survival engine designed exclusively for emotional meaning. When you interact with anyone today, a stranger on the street, a coworker, or someone you love, remember this silent, hard-coded rule of human nature. People will lose your exact words within hours. They will forget your logical explanations by tomorrow morning, but the precise chemical trace you leave inside their nervous system will define who you are to them for the rest of their lives. In the end, we do not experience our lives as a chronological series of objective facts. We live them as a lingering collection of feelings that survived long after the words turned to dust.